Hello and welcome. We're so delighted you've chosen to matriculate at Duke, and we're really excited to greet you. We're doing all kinds of preparation to be ready for you in the fall. I imagine when you were filling out your applications in the fall, you did not expect to matriculate during a global pandemic. And I know that the transition to college is very intense. It's exciting, but also daunting. And I'm sure for many of you, it's amplified by the fact that the world is going through a very intense transition of its own. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that this is a crisis. A crisis is a medical word originally, and it means a turning point. And while there's a lot of tragedy and anxiety, this is also an opportunity for productive change. It's a chance to pause and see what really needs to change in our society and to make that positive change. And I believe there is no better preparation for that than a liberal arts education. You have an unprecedented opportunity to really participate in making positive change in the world. And I believe a liberal arts education is the best preparation for that. Many people your age are in systems that specialize. You have to pick your career, you need to know what you're going to do, and you have a very narrow education to get there. The philosophy behind the liberal arts education is much more breadth and exploration, and maybe even changing along the way, things unexpected coming up. A liberal arts education prepares you for the unexpected, and we all want you to take the fullest advantage of the opportunities, classes, activities, and other possibilities that Duke offers. So, where do you begin? I'm going to suggest that between now and your arrival at Duke, you take some time to really sit back and think about what are the big questions you have about the world. I don't mean what are you going to be or what do you need to know, but what do you really want to understand about the world? And I've always found questions like that lead to your passions. You may find that they're exactly what you think they are. You may find you're on exactly the right track. But many of you, I think, will find surprises. You may discover things you haven't thought about doing and things you want to know that you've never really thought about wanting to know. And that's what an education is all about. I want to urge you to follow your passions. I think they're the best guide you can possibly have, whether you're choosing classes, choosing activities, choosing other opportunities. Let your passions lead you. And let me give you an example from my own liberal arts education. I went to college absolutely sure I was going to be a journalist. I had worked on all of my middle school and high school newspapers and all kinds of different jobs, and this is exactly what I wanted to do. And in fact, I picked my college in part because the student newspaper was so good. And I could not wait for the first meeting of the student newspaper. So I went to the orientation for first year students, and I got there early and I sat in the front and I just couldn't wait. And I was really disappointed because what happened was the staff of the newspaper came out and they told us to look around, and they told us we were in competition with each other and that we shouldn't think this was going to be fun. It was really serious, and how they took their newspaper work more seriously than their classwork. And if we were going to be serious about even getting onto the newspaper, that's what we had to do. And I thought, well, I've always enjoyed it, so, I'll give it a chance, but this does not sound fun to me. And I made sure that I went to a couple of other orientations as well. And one in particular, there was an organization, an umbrella organization, for a lot of groups that were involved in community activities, community outreach. And I had always been very interested in that. So I went to the orientation for that, and I was delighted. There was an organization that was involved in enrichment programs for kids who were gifted, who were in the schools who wanted more challenge, particularly in English and math. And I had done some tutoring in both English and math, and I had loved it. And I had also taught French to elementary school children. I had always loved teaching, but I had never really thought about that as a career possibility because I was going to be a journalist. So what I noticed was exactly the opposite of what I had seen at the newspaper. They all seemed to really like each other, and they were so excited about the program. And it wasn't in competition with anyone or anything. It was just joy. And I thought, sign me up. So I went and I said, what do you have? And they said, well, we need a 6th grade English teacher. I said, I'm there. I worked for that organization for all 4 years I was in college. I participated in running it. I loved every minute of it. I loved my students. I loved my colleagues. I wrote a few pieces for the newspaper, and it was exactly what I had felt on the first meeting. And I didn't become a journalist. I became an English professor. So there we are. So I want you to think not only about following your passions in terms of your activities, but also in terms of your classes. Let yourself really go through the course offerings. I mean, maybe you have a sense of what you want to take, and maybe there were things you loved in high school, and by all means, take classes in those subjects. But open your mind to things maybe you know nothing about, that you haven't thought about. And again, I have a story from my own liberal arts education. I was a rising sophomore, and I had taken a pretty broad range of classes my first year, my freshman year, and I had loved it. And I was looking for classes in all the same things that I had taken classes in because I had had such a great time. But somehow or another, my eye caught on a class that was called The Just Society. And I thought, that's an interesting title. What is this class about? And I looked, and it was a class where we were going to read a bunch of political theorists who were talking from varying perspectives about what they thought a just society was. And I thought, this is amazing. I really want to take this class. And everything else faded away. That was my priority class. I cleared everything out of my schedule at that time. That was the class I was going to take. And I was so excited. And I went back and looked at it one more time. And I realized it was a senior seminar in political philosophy. And they were giving priority to the majors from those 2 disciplines, seniors, juniors. And there I was, a sophomore, a rising sophomore with no classes in either philosophy or political science. So who was going to let me into this class? And if they did let me in, because of course it was a seminar, and of course everyone was going to want to take this class. Who wouldn't want to take a class in the Just Society? So I thought, too bad, maybe in the future. And I redid my schedule, but I couldn't stop thinking about the Just Society. So I decided I would go on the first day. Like you, at Duke, we had a shopping period, so we could test out some classes. And I went on the first day, and the professor was amazing. And my classmates were amazing. And I had such a great time, and I participated probably more than anybody. And in fact, people who know me are sure I participated more than anybody. And I thought, this is great. This is the class I've been looking for. And as we got near the end of class, my heart sank, because I thought, I need the instructor's permission. I've never taken a class in this area. How can I possibly keep up with people? They're all going to be, they're all going to know what's going on, and I won't. And anyway, I'm a last priority. I'm not going to get into this class. So afterwards, I was trying to think of how I could persuade the teacher, and I went up to him and I said, just came out with it. Haven't taken classes in these departments. I'm a rising sophomore, but I really, really want to take this class. And he said, after your participation, you have to take this class. Well, I loved that class, and it laid the foundation for everything that I went on to do. Did I take more philosophy classes? No. More political science? No. I didn't major in them. I didn't take classes in them. But that class was the foundation for all of my thinking. I became an English major because I also had a passion for reading poetry, reading novels, reading beautiful, creative nonfiction. I loved words. I loved what people could do with words. I loved how they helped me think about the world. And my question was always, well, how do I bring these interests together? Because things are different now. But back then, English classes didn't think a lot about social justice. And that class had made that my primary area of questions. How do we make the world better? How do people come to believe things together? How do you pierce people's biases and ask them to think differently about the world? How do you do that? And I realized that for me, poetry was getting me to look at all kinds of things in the world differently. And when I read a novel, I was getting the perspective of different characters. I was in their heads. And when I read an essay, same thing. I was in the head of the essay writer, and they were asking me to look at the world differently from how I was looking at the world. There were all kinds of surprises, things I didn't like, things I did, things I questioned, beliefs I held even more firmly after all this reading. But that was the basis for me. of social justice, seeing the world through the eyes of others. I also, along the way, came upon a quotation from a poet named Muriel Rukeyser, who said, the universe is made up of stories, not of atoms. And that quotation has stayed with me for decades. I think about it, I go back to it, I change my mind about what it means, but I always go back to that quotation. And I think the world is, I believe in the material world. I'm deeply interested in science. I believe in atoms and they do make up the world, but so do stories. We know the word world through language, through the stories we tell. And in fact, I've gone on to write books about literature, law, and science, including one that was about the stories that we tell about what I call the outbreak narrative. That's very appropriate to the current moment. And that's a book about going back to the 1990s. There were a lot of scientists in the wake of the HIV pandemic who were very interested in the novel. They had identified a number of novel, catastrophic, communicable diseases that were emerging in remote locations, things like Ebola and Marburg fever. And they had a conference about it and they put it out into the world that we had to be concerned about something they called the coming plague. And they said, you can't just rely on scientific medicine to solve this problem. The world is changing, it's shrinking, we're more and more connected. We're also, the population is growing and we're settling into places where people haven't lived before. And those two things together are creating the conditions that cause these outbreaks and that turn them into pandemics. And we have to change the way we live. And what I tracked was how that story moved from science into the mainstream media and into popular fiction and film, and how you might say it mutated along the way. And that the story we ended up getting, in fact, was telling us we should rely on scientific medicine, science and medicine, and we really didn't have to change the way we were living. And so my question in this book was, how do we change that story? I wasn't the only one asking it then, and I'm certainly not the only person asking that now. How do we change our stories so that we live more equitably, more effectively, more justly in the world? And those are the questions I bring. I've been incredibly fortunate. My liberal arts education prepared me to do this kind of work. I'm really lucky in the colleagues I have at this wonderful university. Whenever, while I was writing that book, I needed to ask questions about virology or epidemiology or genetics or anything, I could knock on the door of one of my colleagues in science and they would explain it to me and work with me and give me things to read. But even more, my amazing students who, when I taught this material, were so smart and so creative and raised so many interesting questions and points and brought their own expertise. You all have expertise and you bring it to our classrooms. And this is why it's so amazingly exciting. And so I really urge you to use this university, and that means lots of things. Pay attention to all the different things we could do. We have a campus farm that you could work on. We have an incredible dance department. You can take dance theory, you can take dance classes. Have you ever wanted to start dance and you've been afraid? Well, give it a shot. All manner of things, engineering and medicine, incredible opportunities for you to get involved in. So I want to start to conclude my remarks here actually with the words of one of my amazing students. When I was asked to do this talk, I immediately emailed a student of mine that graduated a couple years ago that I had the privilege and pleasure to work with. I advised his senior thesis. We also did some independent studies and classwork. And he was a student in gender, sexuality, and feminist studies, which I was chairing at the time. And I got to know him very well. So I emailed him and I said, what do you wish you had known? What would you like to have heard? And he wrote such a beautiful email that I asked if I could read it. And I'm going to read his email and then conclude. So he writes, the biggest thing I can retroactively appreciate in the transition from high school to a liberal arts education in college was the movement from achievement-based academics to a people-focused education. In high school, I understood myself and my education only in relation to myself. I entered college with that mentality. I'd argue that I kept that mentality only until I started taking courses that were completely unknown to me prior to the first class: food, farming, and feminism. Not my class. That's when the shift began. I started to perceive my education not as a race to the highest point of achievement, but as an exploration of people, ideas, and unknowns. It was a dream to learn how much I did not know. It was such a relief, mentally, physically, emotionally, academically, to begin enjoying the exploration of ideas as opposed to trying to control them for the purpose of getting a higher grade. Ironically, I think that's also the reason I got higher grades as I progressed through college, was passions. One final thing, the absolute best thing I got out of my liberal arts education are the relationships I formed with professors and with friends who consistently challenged the way I think. I grew as a person and as an academic. I gained a stronger sense of self, and I was happier for it. I wish I had appreciated that fact when I first came into college. In sum, a liberal arts education is an opportunity for you to focus less on high achievement and more on the exploration of ideas, people, and yourself. Enjoy it. Let me say a word quickly about him in closing. This is an incredibly talented man. He is a visual artist, he's a poet, he writes fiction. He thought he wanted to get a Master of Fine Arts. He thought maybe he wanted to get a PhD in English and teach English. And he decided he was going to take a couple of years off to figure out what his driving questions are, because he also has a passion for social justice. He started out in environmental studies, moved into GSF, Gender, Sexuality, and Feminist Studies, because of the kinds of questions that those classes were prodding him to think about. And now he has decided he's going to law school. And I think it's a great decision for him. And I want to make the point that you may not think of GSF as the best preparation for law school, but that department sends a lot of people to law school, to medical school, into business, into computers. Anything you take in college that encourages you to follow your passions will lead you wherever you want and should be going to be happy. So please experiment, come find us, talk to your professors. We really do want to know you and think of you. You'll find out about flunching, where you can just email a professor and say, I'm really interested in the work you're doing. Could we please have lunch? And you can do that virtually. I have lots of students flunch me virtually as well as in person. So please come find us. Come find me. I want to talk to you. And welcome to Duke.